All right. Hello, everyone. Kyle, AA0Z here. Welcome to the channel and welcome to the Node Red every 2 week stream. Every other Thursday, we get together at 8 p.m. Central, talk about Node Red. You got a question, put it in the chat. We'll be fielding some questions. Ron's there, Steven's there. People that are much smarter than me on Node Red can field your question and maybe make better use of words than I. One thing I want to show is if you are new to Node Red, there's a whole playlist. The link is in the video description below. And we start from scratch. We start with a Raspberry Pi and a blank SD card. We get it up and running. We get Node Red installed. We did last week or 2 weeks ago, we took a Digital Loggers Pro web switch and went through the flow, got that up and running. But if you have any more questions then I can't answer here, or anybody can answer, or if you have this burning desire to ask a question at 3 o'clock in the morning, what you want to do is go over to the Groups.io Node Red for Ham Radio webpage. And there's over 1,000 people in the 1,195 members. We got almost 1,000 topics, 939 topics that you can go over and ask questions. And there's a lot of smart people over there that can answer your questions. So tonight, what we're going to do is 2 weeks ago, we did the Digital Loggers Pro web switch, but I'm going to take a step back and we're just going to go over some of the common nodes that you will see whenever you're building your first flow or you're loading a flow from the file section, or maybe you got it off the internet or wherever, on how you can maybe decipher what that flow is doing and put some debug nodes on the flow and see the output, the message payload, or maybe the message topic or something else that's coming out of that node, and do a little troubleshooting if you're not getting what you're expecting. So what we're going to do is as I go through here, put your questions in the chat. You might want to put the word question before your question, so that signifies that you got a question. If not, Ron is there. We've got some other mods, Don, N5SKT, Uber Geek. Hello. We got K5YVY in the house. So put your questions in the chat. They will field them. I'm going to continue on. So let's get started here. So one of the first things that you're going to use in a flow is your inject node. So what that does, that typically starts a flow. So you probably have got, if you're running left or right, the timestamp or the inject node is going to start the flow. So if I double click on this timestamp, we've got quite a few things that we can choose from message payload. Message payload is just a, it is the default piece of information that is passed from node to node. Okay, you can pass other things. You can see that there's a message topic in here. We can add something and call it message. Let's call it rate, because we're a contester. And we can add some things to this inject node that will start and inject those pieces of information into the flow. Okay, so message payload by default is sending a timestamp. That timestamp is epoch timestamp, and I forget if it's somebody in the chat, keep me honest. Can't remember if it's milliseconds since January 1st, 1970, or if it's seconds. I can't remember. But anyway, we'll see whenever we put the debug node. So I'm going to erase the message rate just for a little bit. January 1st, 1970, Steven says. And he knows. He's a programmer. Unix is in seconds. Not sure what node red is in. Okay, well, we will find out real quick. So here we are injecting a timestamp, and we're going to erase this message topic here, and we're only going to do the timestamp in inject. So let's go ahead and hit the done, and then in order for us to see what is being injected, we need to drag over a debug node and wire that up. You can see that the only thing that is going to display, the debug node, is message payload. Okay, keep that in mind. So let's hit the deploy. And then to start this this inject node, you have to hit this button. Now, let me go back into the debug node. You can come down here to this inject after 0.1 seconds, and then you can, let's say you want to start the flow every 1 second. So you can automatically start this flow every 1 second. So let's just, let's keep that there. Let's deploy this again. So go up to the red deploy button. And let's start that. Well, it automatically started because I said inject. So this is what it's given me. And let's stop this here because this is going to drive me batty. So let's none and hit done and deploy. So you could see that it was injecting once a second there, which was expected behavior here. So let's clear this by coming up here to the trash and clear all the messages, all the debug messages. And by the way, this is called the sidebar, and then we are clicked on the little debug icon up here for debug messages, and that's where these messages are showing up. Okay, so let's inject this timestamp, and it gives me a message. Payload is, it says it's a number, and then here is the time, and you see that whenever I click on it, it changes the value. This is the epoch time by default, so whatever that is, 1 trillion billion gazillion. If I double click on it, it gives it in, that is in UTC, so the 22nd, March 4th. Time is 02:07:23 Zulu. If I click on it again, it gives it another format, which is human readable. And then it gives it, I guess that's hex that it gives it in. Not really sure. But anyway, you get the point. So let's come over here to timestamp. And if you click on the drop-down menu, you've got a you got a ton of new things that you can inject. So we're not going to inject a flow or a global variable, but let's click on this string. And let's give this a string, which is a bunch of characters, right? So let's say the frequency is, and let's inject that. So let's deploy that. And then whenever I inject that, it's going to give me a string. So the message payload is string, and it's going to say the frequency is. It's expected output, okay? You can also inject a number. So let's do a number. See where I clicked on that? Do a number, and let's do a frequency, 14.200. I think that's going to truncate it to 14.2. And deploy that. And it did, yep. So we injected a number of 14.2, and there's the frequency. You can do a Boolean, which is a true or a false. So let's inject true here. Deploy. There's our Boolean. And what else can we inject here? We did the timestamp. So let's take a look at, so that's about all that I want to cover on the inject node. But what I want to do is I want to cover this message payload debug node. So in previous training sessions, we talked about choosing the complete message object. So right now, it is only giving me message payload, which is just this this value, right? So it gives me the epoch, the string, a number, a Boolean, okay? So what happens if I come back up here to my timestamp, or my inject node, sorry, and I add a message topic, which those are common payloads for some of the dashboard nodes, and I give it a string, and I say my frequency is, hit my done button, deploy that, and because I'm only debugging the message payload, I'm not going to see the message topic. I'm only going to get the well, it puts it up here, but the default that I'm going to see on my debug is only message payload. Okay, so let's add another one. Let's add a message dot rate. Okay, and deploy that and inject that, and you see deploy rate, which I believe was false, or for blank. Let's give it a number. Let's give it a number of 14.200. Gonna truncate it to 14.2. So let's deploy that. Come back here and inject it. So the only thing that I'm gonna see is true. What do I need to do to see all of those messages that are coming across from that node? Well, you got to come up here to the debug node, and you have to change this to complete message object. Okay. Once I do that and inject this again, I should see all of my, let's clear this real quick so you guys can see it up there. So now whenever I click on my debug node, you're going to see that it's got this message ID, the payload is true, the topic is my frequency is, and my rate is 14.2. And that matches up with payload true, topic my frequency is, and rate 14.2. So that's all the things that I wanted to show on the inject and the debug, just to make sure that everyone knew what was going on. Most of the time, you're just going to have this timestamp, and it's just going to inject the timestamp. And once it starts the flow, that timestamp, that epoch timestamp, is usually just thrown away, and it just is a trigger to start a flow. Let's move on to the switch node. Okay, so switch node, in my mind, is just a big if then else statement. Maybe it's just a big if statement. So this switch, the default is message payload. Okay, we learned about that. But then here, you can give it a bunch of rules that it will traverse through. And if it sees it's true or it matches one of those rules, it will send it out the node in the correct slot. So you can have many slots here and send it out per I lost my train of thought. I was reading Steven's message here. Repeating injections. You'll have to. I don't have any context with that, Steven. But so it's got in this drop-down menu, the check is a bunch of different things. You can have some equals. It's not equal. Greater than, less than, greater than or equal. Is between is good if you're reading frequencies. Contains is if it contains a word or if it contains a number. Regex is you'll have to look up regex. It's a kind of a syntax on matching things. Is true, is false, is null, is not null, is type of, is empty, is not empty. We're going to concentrate on maybe like this equals. So what we'll do is we will say, oh yeah, Steven says you can set an inject node to repeat every X sentence or X seconds and such. Yeah, we reviewed that in the before and showed that. But yeah, that is, let's say you want to repeat a a flow over and over and over, you can set that that inject node. All right, so let's go back to the switch node here. And let's say we want to, on this number, we're going to choose a number, and for some odd reason, somebody in the chat can tell me why equals a double equal. I forget, but so let's say we're going to give it a number of 0, and then let's add another one, and we're going to give it a number of 1, and we're going to add a number of 2, okay? And we're going to come down here, and we're going to say, we're going to check all the rules, and you can see another option is stopping after the first match. So it's going to start at the top and work its way down. So here we've got we got 3 options: 0, 1, or 2, right? Okay. You can see that that switch put in 3 little outputs here. So we're going to put our timestamp here, and we're going to give it a number, and we're going to start it out with 0. Okay. So we're going to inject a 0 here. Let's inject another one here, and let's give it a number, and let's give it 1, and let's bring over another one. You can see that you can wire up many nodes to a single to another single node. So here I've got 0, 1, and 2, right? So I'm going to wire all these up to the switch. And here in the debug node, we're just going to do message payload, and we're going to wire up every single one of these. These outputs. Okay. And we're going to call, and you can name these outputs. So you can call this output 1, output 2. And you probably should name your debugs, because once you get a bunch of debugs, it can get a little bit hairy here. Okay. So I've got a switch coming in. I've got these debugs. I've got 0, 1, and 2 as injects into the switch. We're doing 0, 1, and 2 for our checks, and output 1, output 2, and output 3. All right, so let's deploy this, and let's clear the debug. So if I inject a 0, 0 is going to come out of, which one is it going to come out of? And you hover over and see how it highlights 1. That's how you can tell which one it is. Also, you can come up here, and it's going to say node, and it's going to give you the name of the debug. Okay. Steven says the double equals is read, single equals is sent, and a third equals is equivalent. Ah, very good. Okay. Oh no, that was DP5 DRE. Steven says is assignment and is comparison. Okay. I learned something new today. Yeah, I couldn't remember when 2 or 3 were used. But anyway, back to our example. So 0 comes out of output 1. That's expected. So now let's inject a 1. So that comes out of output 2, which is our second output. Number 2 right here. Okay. We inject a 2, we should get it out of output 3. So if we erase output 1 and output 2 and clear our debug, and we inject a 0, let's see. Oh, I have to deploy it. I'm like, why did it say it? So now I don't have any debugs on output 1 or output 2. So if I inject a 0, it's still going to come out of that output, but we're not going to see it because we don't have a debug attached to that switch node. Okay. So Let's do one other thing. Let's do is true. And then let's remove the rest of this. Okay. So now it's only got one output. Okay. And let's keep this output 3. And now let's change this to a Boolean, which let's say that one's true. And then let's make this input or inject a Boolean of false. And then let's get rid of this one. Okay, so now we've got two inputs, a true and a false. Our switch is true. And then we've got this output 3. So if I inject a true, it's going to give me an output of true. If I inject a false, it's not going to give me anything because it's looking for a true. So that's a way that you can do a check and keep things from flowing. You know, if you want to stop a flow, basically, you can give it a switch with one output, or just not, or you could give it two outputs and just not wire up anything to the other output. But yeah, this is a good check, like the switch node here. I think that's all I'm going to do on the switch node. Probably get the gist of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this intact, and let's go down to the change node. So a change node will take something and either change it to something else. So there's a bunch of different things it can do. It can set a value, it can change a value, it can delete a value, and it can move a value. Okay? So whenever a payload comes into that node that is a change node, it's going to do some type of work on that either message payload or whatever payload you have set, and this is where you designate where it needs or what it needs to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do set message payload to the value of this is my frequency. Oh, frequency, right? Yes. Okay, so I set message payload to the value of this is my frequency. And I'm only going to do that, right, whenever true comes out of the switch node. So then I wire up output 3. I'm going to change this to say output 1. I like to do that. And so if I inject a true, it's going to go to the switch node. It's going to see if it's true. If it is true, it's going to send it over to this change node, and it's automatically going to just set message payload to the value of this is my frequency, and then we should be able to see this is my frequency on output 1. So let's see if that happens. And it does. This is my frequency. If I inject a false here, it's not going to give me anything. Hopefully it's not going to give me anything. And it didn't. I just injected it and it didn't. If I set this switch to is false and deploy this and go back to the false, it's going to shoot out, or I'm going to see in my debug, my output 1, this is my frequency. And I did. So that is the switch node in a nutshell. So let's play a little bit more with the change node here. So let's change. So keep in mind, coming out of the switch node is the payload true. Or, well, actually, now it's false. So what we're going to do is we are going to take and let me just make sure that it is false. So coming into the switch node, or coming out of the switch node, is false. So it's looking for a false coming out of the switch, okay? And then into this node, we're going to say, so message payload equals false, right? Because it's coming out of the switch node. So now we are going to change that message payload. We're going to search, let's see, Yeah, we're gonna search for the Boolean false, and we're gonna replace it with, let's say, this is my frequency, and that's a string. Okay. So another way that you can change the payload. Okay. So coming out of the switch is false. We're going to search for message payload equals false, and we're going to replace it with this is my frequency. So here, after I clear this and I deploy, if I inject a true, I'm not going to get anything. If I inject a false, this is my frequency, is what comes out of that debug node. Let's see, what else can you do? Can delete message payload or move message payload. So this is if you're moving from variable to variable. Not going to get into that, but you get the gist of what a change node looks like. Let's see, what else did we have? Did we have a filter? So let's put a filter in line here. And this used to be the rule by exception. So this filter here, let's just bring it, see how I just hovered it over there and it automatically turned to a dotted line. And then whenever you let go, it became solid and connected those two nodes together. So, and you can tell by now those two nodes are connected. Only whenever there's a dotted line. Okay. Now, what's the frequency, Kenneth? Maybe we'll pass some REM in the payload. So, the filter node used to be the rule by exception node, and it is going to block unless the value changes. Okay, so I can't remember if it passes. I think it passes the first value, and then if that value is continually coming into that node, it's not going to pass anything unless that value changes. So, and it's looking for message payload. Okay. We're not going to get into apply search, apply mode separately for each topic. That's an advanced topic. So let's just put this rule by exception filter in. And if I can remember right, this is my frequency, is if message payload equals, or it's going to search for false, and it's going to replace it by this is my frequency. Okay. Yeah, PD5DRE says, can you give a purpose when you use these examples? Well, I can, but you know, let me see if I can think of a instance where you would use those. Oh yeah, so Ron and Steven and Don in the chat, N5KST, SKT, sorry, N5SKT can give you some examples on where you would use some of these nodes. All right, so rule by exception, filter. We're going to block unless the value changes. Okay, so how would I set this up for a good example? You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this switch. I'm going to create another node in here, or another output, and I'm going to say is true goes to message output 2. And I'm going to click done. And I'm going to add another change node. Add another change node here, and I'm going to say if message payload, I'm going to search for a Boolean, and I'm going to say if search for a true, and I'm going to replace this REM is my favorite band. Okay. And then I'm going to change this to what's the frequency? Kenneth. Okay. So I've got what's the frequency, Kenneth, and REM is my favorite band. If it is false, we're going to replace it with what's the frequency, Kenneth. if the message payload is true, REM is my favorite band. Okay. So let's just make sure that that is going to work. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to bring in another debug node, and we're just going to take a look at what that message payload looks like. So now I am clearing the debug, and true comes in. Oh, I missed a wire here. You can see that I missed a wire. Let's redeploy. True. REM is my favorite band. Correct. Going to inject a false. What's the frequency? Frequency, Kenneth. Perfect. This is what I need. Okay, so we're going to wire this filter up, and we're going to deploy. So keep in mind, it's going to pass the first one, I believe, pass the first message payload, and if the message payload keeps coming into that node and it's the same payload, it's going to drop it. If it changes, then it's going to pass the new payload with the new value. So if I inject a true, and keep in mind we're output 1 here, so we're connected to the filter. Output 1, I'm sorry, I'm going to inject a true, and it's going to say REM is my favorite band. I'm going to keep injecting. I'm pressing the button here, my mouse button, and I'm injecting, and nothing is happening. Okay? Now, whenever I inject the false, I should get what's the frequency Kenneth in output 1. And I do. Because those two message payloads are different. Now let's inject the false over and over. I don't know if you can hear my mouse click, but I'm injecting, and nothing's coming out. So let's go back to the true. I should now get REM as my favorite band, and I do. And I'm injecting. Yep. So the rule by exception filter works. And there's some other things that you can do for the rule by injection. We're not going to get into those, but just the default value is what you'll see in a lot of these flows. All right. Moving on. What else did I put in here? Did I put a delay? Okay, so let's talk about a delay here. So this delay is 5 seconds. So it's going to delay each message. It's going to give a fixed delay of 5 seconds. And so we can put this into the flow. So let's just wire up an inject node, and let's inject a number, and let's get rid of this message topic, and let's inject the frequency, 14.200. Okay. So, and let's I'm going to do this manually, and let's put another debug node on here, and let's wire this up. So the delay is asleep. Yes. So let's deploy this. So I'm going to inject this whenever I say the word 1 and in 5. All right. So if I inject now 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, there it goes. 5 seconds later, then I get my payload. Okay. Let's inject one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There it is. So it just delays the flow, and you can say delay each message, or rate limit each message, or rate limit the flow to all the messages, and then we're gonna, let's say we want one message per 5 seconds. Okay, and all of the other messages, we're going to drop all the intermediate messages. Okay, rate limit, all messages. We only want one message per 5 seconds. And then drop intermediate messages. Steven says it will delay that flow, but not all the flow lines. So a limited sleep. Yes. Yes. Good point. Good point. You could also have another wire that goes around it. Yes. Correct. Yeah. Good point there. So here is we are limiting one message per 5 seconds. So now let's go back down to our inject node and let's do a inject interval of 1 every second. So we should only get one message every 5 seconds, right? And you can tell that the inject node is a interval because it gives this kind of half circle. I don't even know what that's called. Somebody in the chat tell me what that's called in technical terms. It's like a half an arrow with in a circle. Okay, so when I start this flow, hopefully we will only get one message every 5 seconds here, and it should be 14.2. So here we go. There was our first one. So it should come up every 5 seconds. 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the second one. 2, 3, 4, 5. There's the third one. A loop. Yeah. So this is good if you want to rate limit the flow and only send a certain amount of messages on. Okay. So let's shut this down so it's not driving us crazy. Yeah, OCD. I got a little OCD. I got a lot of 3-letter acronyms going on in my life. Let's see, what else? Did we talk about the trigger? Yeah, let's talk about a trigger. I'm not as familiar with the trigger. It's got quite a few options here. So what we're going to do is, how can I demonstrate this? Send a 1 and wait for. So let's do this. Let's send a Boolean true. Wait for 5 seconds, and then send a string, and that string is what's the frequency? Okay. So whenever we start or a payload comes into that trigger, it's going to send a true. It's going to wait for 5 seconds, and then it's going to send a string that says, what's the frequency? So how do we start that node? Oh, we inject a timestamp. Now let's take our input 1 here and let's bring it down here, and let's take a look at the output of that. So let's clear our debug. Okay, let's deploy, and let's. Oh, this is gonna drive me crazy. No, we got to get rid of this debug. Sorry, guys, it's gonna drive me crazy. Okay, so now we're concentrating on this flow right here. Okay, so let's inject this. So we should see true, and then 5 seconds later, the string, what's the frequency? So there's our true, and then 5 seconds later, we should get what's the frequency. Pretty straightforward. There's a whole useful, things that you can do with the trigger. Can't think of one off the top of my head. You never do math on camera. The golden rule of YouTube. Never do math on camera. And I'm doing math in my head. So, let's see. What else could you do? And so, let's say you wanted to start a flow 5 seconds after you got the input, but you don't want to send anything. Well, you don't want to send any. then nothing. And then maybe you want to send let's send a true. Okay, so here we're going to send nothing, and then 5 seconds after I start the flow, it's going to send a true. So I inject now, 2, 3, 4, 5, sends a true. Ron says, yeah, notice Kyle selected a bunch of nodes and dragged them. Yes. So you can, let's go over that, Ron. That's a good idea. So you can see that I selected a bunch of nodes, and you can't left click or right click and pull down like a menu like you can like in, Microsoft Word or Windows or whatnot. But what you can do is I am clicking on Control C. So you can see where it came up here and said 3 nodes copied. And then I can come down here and hit a Control V and copy those same nodes over and over. So I can grab these, copy those. There, I got duplicates. And I can do that not with whole flows, but with just individual nodes. So now I've got these 4 debug nodes selected. I can hit Control C, and I can put another set of debug nodes here. And then, because they are all highlighted, I can move them around the screen. So some stuff getting around the screen here. Some other things that you can do is you can zoom in and zoom out. So if I zoom in and zoom out, you can see that it navigates per the zoom. So I've got this pretty big, so you guys can see it out there. That's a little bit of navigating. So let's delete all of these. So I just selected all of them and hit the delete button, and that deletes them. Get rid of this one. Let's let's keep all the rest of these. All right, what else is out there? I'm going to get to the link in and link out here in a minute. What else was I going to do? Man, I need to go back to my thumbnail and, or actually my, my description. All right, so I talked about the change node, the switch node, the link in and link out nodes. We'll get to that. Debug, inject, split, and join. So this is kind of an advanced topic, but I have a example down here that I want to show, and this is something that I'm working on with another person for the Missouri QSO party. And what we are doing is we are going out to this website, and we're going to pull down a bunch of data from a website. Okay, so let's just take a look at that real quick. Let's clear the debug, and whenever we inject this, well, that's unexpected. I didn't expect it to do that. Do I have this as a UT? Oh, I want a parse JSON buffer. That's what my JSON buffer. Okay, yeah. All right, so sorry guys, had an incorrect output here. All right, so if I inject this, it is going to give me this output. Okay. This is just some spot information that we are working on, and this is the payload, right? It's got an ID, spotted call sign, spotted spotter call sign, the time, comments, event field, frequency, mode, counties, and a flag. Okay. So if I clear that, I think that I've got a different type of call to the API. Yeah, I do. Okay. So this is where a split node comes in. Nice is, so let's say you're grabbing a bunch of data, and it is an array. So an array is just a grouping of values. Somebody else can tell me in the chat what an array, the technical term for a programming term for an array. So here I'm going to get a bunch of different values. That's a bunch of different values. You can see 0 through 9. And if I drill down through here, you can see that I've got this object and I've got a value. I've got this other object that's got a value. I've got this object that's got a value. And I've got all the way down to 80 objects here. That, how do I get the information out of this payload that I want to split every single one of these values out to its own individual payload? Well, you use the split node. And typically I just use the default split, and Node-RED is smart enough to know where to split it typically. And it gives me, you'll see after I run this and I run it through the split command, that all of this right here will be one payload, and this will be another payload, and this will be another payload. Okay, so let's wire this up. And let's remove, actually, let's turn this debug off. I didn't even talk about how to turn debugs on and off. You can turn debugs on and off by clicking on the button on the right-hand side. So now let's deploy this. Let's clear our debug. And now whenever I inject this, it is going to go out there. It's going to grab that array. That split node is going to split it into its individual payloads. And you're going to see a bunch of stuff fly by. And if I click on one of these, here is, oh, we were messing with the, here, let's do one that's a little more family friendly here. So let's take a look at message payload ID number 63. So there is K4KEV, KV, K0KEV, and you can see that it is split this payload into individual, or the array into individual payloads. Okay. Now, the way that it can figure this out is, let's go back to our debug node and let's do a complete message object, and let's do the done. Let's deploy that again. Let's clear our debug nodes, and let's take a look at some of the more advanced debugs that you're going to see here. Okay, so here is, go down here and come up here. So here's the message payload that we're used to seeing. And then every message has got this headers part that gives some more information. But the real proof in the pudding here is this message ID down here. Sorry, I thought it was in the parts. Now, there's a lot of things going on here. But this is where, if you need to split something and then you need to join it back together, it uses this information to join the information back together. So let's do this just for, where is the split here? Let's bring over a join, and let's put it back in here. So hopefully it's going to take the split. It's going to split it, and then it's going to rejoin it, and then hopefully it's going to look like what we did before we split it. So let's deploy this, and actually let's clear this. Let's turn this message debug on, and so this was the original. It's all in the array. You can see that this first one was ID number 120. So now we're coming down to the second debug, which is this debug node here. And if we take a look at this array, it's the same array. And if we go to, there it is. The same thing, right? ID number 20. This is a comment. Because we rejoined, we split it and we rejoined it, it's in the same format. Okay? And then because we let's move this to message payload. Let's do that one more time. Okay? They're exactly the same. This debug coming out of the HTTP request, this debug coming out of the join. Both these are exactly the same. All right, so that's the split and the join. Those are two useful nodes. One last, let's see. We did the filter node. Maybe if we have time, we'll get to the exec node. Let's talk about link in and link out. So the link in is, let's go back up here to our, let's get rid of this. And I forget what's coming out of this filter here. Deploy this. REM is my favorite band on true, and false is what's the frequency, Kenneth. Okay, so what we can do is, this is basically just using the link in and link out is exactly what you think it is. So we've got this link out, and we're going to call it link out, okay? And we're going to wire this up. It's a link out, right? So now this is going to send all of that data somewhere else. Typically, it is somewhere else in the flow, or it's a new flow, or it's a new tab. Could be anywhere. It's a global parameter here. So now let's create a new flow, and let's bring in the link in, okay? And let's put a debug node on this, and we'll call it link in. And as you can see, here in the dropdown is that link out that we just created. So we're going to link these together by clicking on that, the link out, and hit done. Okay? So you could see over here, when we click on it, it shows us where it's going to. If we click on that, it's going to come back and it's going to highlight it over here, and you can see where these things are, the links are connected to, okay? So if you remember, this was connected to the filter, and the true was REM is my favorite band, and false was what's the frequency, Kenneth. So now if we come over here to flow 2, and we connect message payload and clear this and deploy. Yes, invisible wires. That's a good definition for it, Stephen. Is now everything that I send out of this link out, it's going to come over to this link in and be displayed on this message payload debug node. All right, so let's start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this drop down to well, we're going to keep it all nodes, okay? But what we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to rename this message debug, and we're going to call it flow 2 debug. Okay, so we know which one we're looking at. We're going to redeploy that. Now we're going to come over to flow 1, and now we're going to hit the true button. Well, out of node, the debug node, flow 2 debug, REM is my favorite band. If I come over here to false, I should see what's the frequency, Kenneth, and I do. So if I double click, or I single click on that, it's going to take me to debug that is connected to that link out. So if you have some data that you need to send over to another flow or another tab or somewhere else, it doesn't have to be in this flow. It can be in the same flow. So now let's take another link in, and let's do another debug just for spite here, and let's link this one to the link out. So now there are two. So let's say you've got a big long flow, but you don't want to, keep going. You can bring another flow down to, or all of the messages down to another flow and continue that on the same page or on the same tab, and you're going to see the same outputs here. So not only does it go down the page, but it goes to flow 2. So now we've got this debug, and we're going to call it a flow 1 debug. Done. And then we're going to hit the deploy. So now, let me clear this. Whenever I click the true, hopefully I'm going to get 2 debugs here in my debug window. I do. And now if I click on debug false or inject false, I'm going to get 2, what's the frequency, Kenneth? So, one last one real quick. The exec command. So we kind of covered this in the Digital Loggers Pro flow. This is where you can give it basically a Linux command, and it will give you all of the output of what that Linux command on the command prompt would give you. So let's do an ls. ls is short for list the directories. So let's inject this. And the debug standard output is going to come to this first output. Oh, another thing, you can hover over the outputs of a switch node or any node that has multiple outputs, and it should tell you what the output is. So let's hover over this first node or this first output on this exec command, and that's standard out. Second one is standard error, and the third one is a return code. So we just want the standard output of what's going on here. So if I deploy this, I clear my debug node. My mouth is getting. All right. So if I inject the ls, hopefully in the message payload, I'm going to get the directory listing and the files listing of what would it be? The default user that this is running off of, which is Pi. So let's see if it did. So there are, is that correct? Let me see here. Let me putty into 192.168.1.116. Yes. Pi. And ls. Oh yeah, there it is. Let's see. Ron told me how to change this, and now I forget. Oh, appearance? No. Hang on, guys. I can't remember how to make this bigger. Change settings. Thought you went to window. Here's. Oh, okay. Let's see. I know this is riveting. Anyway, you're gonna have to take I can't find it. So anyway, ls, yeah, bookshelf, desktop, documents, downloads, music, pictures, POTA. That's the same stuff as this over here. Because I issued an ls and it gave me an ls of my home directory on a Pi. So you can put this, like, if you want to get CPU temperature, if you want to get the you want to do a ping. Well, the ping's that's a bad example. There are some other things that you can get from the command line. Let's say you want to get what the IP address is. Maybe you want to shut down the Pi. You can do that. So that is it. We've gone through everything. It's exactly an hour. Change node, switch node, link in and link out, a debug node, an inject node, a split and a join, a delay, a trigger, an exec, and a filter. That's it. It's 9 o'clock Central Time. I turn into a pumpkin in 30 minutes. Anything else that you guys want to, Kyle, show the search window on top of the list of the nodes. Yeah. So up here, you can see this. Let's see. So you can search for nodes. Let's say you have a ton of nodes loaded here. So I want to search for a, let's say, a function. There's the function node. I want to search for a switch node. There's a switch. And it shows two because it shows the dashboard. I want to search for a change node. There's the change node. Let's see what else. So you can search for your different nodes that you've got loaded in your palette. And remember, let's take a look here. Let's see if I got any updates. So if I go down here to Manage Palette, and I click on, so these are all the nodes that I have installed. If I click the install, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. This is where you're going to see if you have any nodes that need to be updated. You can see that I don't have any nodes that need to be updated. You'd see a update to version, whatever it is, over here. The install is where you want to search for nodes. So I want to do, let's see, a countdown. That's where you install nodes from the internet that people have published as verified nodes. And then you can go over here and do some research on if that node is what you need. But I guarantee you, the community out there has put together so many nodes that you can download. Unless you're Steven and you got a Flex radio and you're designing nodes, someone else has probably done a node for you that does what you need it to do. There's a ton of stuff. Yeah. I think that's it. Anything else? I've got the delay super quick on the chat here, so this is almost real time. There's no like 30-second delay going on. So I will stick around for a couple more minutes. If you got any questions, put them in the chat. If you want to do a subscribe and a thumbs up for this video, appreciate it. Gets more people, this video about Node-RED in front of more people. Shows them about ham radio. Yes, WJSTX. There's a bunch of nodes for that also, I believe. So yeah. If you haven't gone out, again, the groups IO out there, we've got a bunch of great things. Here's the file section. Here's where all of the nodes by type are. This is the wiki location that Dave has put together. Go out there, and if you got, if you need to install .NET or FRStack, FRStack is only for Flex users. Keep that in mind. You can go out there and take a look. If you want to install .NET, That's out there too. So, yeah. Thanks everyone for hanging out. Appreciate it. Thanks, John and Michael and Ron for moderating, and PD5DRE. Don's in the chat. Who else is in the chat out there? That's Nature's Child. Hello, hello. Dan Martin. Thank you, thank you. Uber Geek. Thank you. So, yeah. If you have any questions, go out to the ham radio for our ham radio for Node-RED for ham radio, groups.io. Ask your questions out there. So, very good. I'm going to shut it down. Thanks, everyone. We will see you in 2 weeks. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about something. Maybe we'll learn some more flows. So, but anyway, hey, Iowa Hawk. Iowa Hank, sorry. Iowa Hank. Hello, hello. So we're going to shut her down. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later. I always forget how to shut this thing down. All right, later.